We talked about ministering to the 99. There were a few questions after the last session that were raised. I just want to address them. Somebody asked, essentially, can you ask, if you're in a hospital and the person's having lunch, can you ask for the dessert? I wouldn't ask for it, no. But there have been times I think the patient said, "Hey, Pastor, would you like something to eat?" I'm not going to eat this. I never took them up on it, but...
I'm asking for a friend.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Asking for a friend. Okay. Here's a question that was handed to me. As an elder, what or how should I respond when asked a spiritual or doctrinal question during a visit and I do not know the answer? First of all, admit it, right? Be truthful. Say, I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I will talk to pastor and get back to you. Notice I didn't say I will find the answer and get back to you. Why? There may not be an answer, right? Because sometimes we have questions in which this side of heaven, we don't know the answer. But it's helpful to say, I will talk to pastor and get back to you, and then your pastor can guide you on how to appropriately respond. And when I say get back to you, make sure you get back to them. And I would suggest either that day or the next day. In other words, relatively soon, get back to them. Not necessarily in person, maybe give them a phone call, but don't let them hanging for a week or so, or till next month when you visit them. But that's how I would handle that. Just be open and honest that you're not sure. What you don't want to do is try to guess at a doctrinal question and hope you're right. So another question that was raised, when do you go with another person to make a visit? If you're visiting someone in their home and a female person in the home, and especially if they're somewhat your age or younger, take your spouse or someone else, with you, to make that visit, just to be above board. Okay, with that. Now we're going to be talking about visiting the inactive members. Should you go with another elder to visit a spiritually distant member? I would say no at this point. Because if you go with another elder, it may appear that to that person you're ganging up on them. If you go with another elder, I would at least start with just one-on-one, and just try to establish relationship and conversation, establish trust, and only if an issue would come up that's of such a nature that you need to have somebody else there to verify what's being said. Then at that point, either another elder or the pastor. Okay, I think there was another, Steve here mentioned something that just like an idea just to share with the rest of the group.
A while back, we had a problem where there were visitations made to members that had memory issues, and we were getting feedback that the church isn't visiting, no one from the church is visiting. At that point, they decided to print up business cards with that person's name and have them dated when they were there, so that when the family came in, they could see that someone from the church had been there.
Okay, so essentially, if you weren't able to hear them, what if you visit somebody, has dementia, cannot remember that you were there, but it's good to let the family know that somebody from the church is visiting. He mentioned they developed business cards, with the name and the name of the church, okay, and to leave it there at the house. That would communicate to family members that you were there.
One suggestion is having a bulletin from the service.
Okay, yeah, bring a bulletin, from the service. That'd be another good idea. It is helpful for the family to know that you're visiting their loved one. And a lot of times, if you visit somebody with dementia, they don't even remember that their own family members were visiting. I've seen that too. And it's helpful to know that they are. If I'm not certain that they are, I will kind of in some way find out if family members visiting on a somewhat regular basis. Okay, any other questions from the last session that you want to raise? If not, we'll get into this next session. And we begin again with things that go without saying but need to be said. First of all, get names and information from your pastor. This is even, I think, more important in this respect. Your pastor may know and may not know why this person is spiritually distant, why this person has not been coming to church, how long this person has been not coming to church. It's only been a few months. Has it been years? The pastor may know some of the family dynamics of that well that you need to know about this. So again, whatever information you can get ahead of time is crucial. Plus, your pastor needs to know which inactive members you're visiting. When I had people, my elders and people from the congregation who were Stephen ministers and also trained in visiting people, I would actually, as pastor, give them the names of the people to contact. So I know they're being contacted. If I didn't do that, then I might call somebody or visit somebody one day, and somebody else, say, visits them the next day, and somebody else's friend visits them the next day. You don't want to bombard them with a whole lot of visits right away. So it's good for the pastor to be able to understand kind of who's getting visited when and how often. Okay, so that's why it's good to get the names and information from your pastor. And by the way, if your elders, if you're set up with, you have a certain section of the congregation that's under your care, okay, then, just let your pastor know, I'm going to begin to visit some of these people here that haven't been in church for a while. So again, so that he knows that those visits are being made. But if you're set up that way, where you have so many families under your care, first of all, that kind of gives you the right and it's part of the authority, to make those visits. And the second thing here, as an elder, and we mentioned this before, you're an extension of the pastor as well as God's representative. In other words, you may ask, what gives you the right to minister to someone who is inactive? Again, you're an extension of the pastor, and as well as God's representative. And this is, obviously crucial ministry. Third thing, know why you're making the contact. Now you may say, well, isn't that obvious? I want the person to come back to church. And obviously we do. But why do you want the person to come back to church? How would you answer that?
To help them increase their faith.
To help them increase their faith. It's good for them. It's for their spiritual well-being. You don't want them to come back to church just so that hopefully they'll contribute and you'll have the church will get more money. Nor do you want them to come back to church and say, hey, we look at our attendance. It's really grown in the last few months. It's not to glorify the church. It's to help the person spiritually so that they would be in the context where they're receiving word and sacrament and they can grow in the faith. So again, always know why you're doing what you're doing and why you want them to come back to church for their own spiritual good. Now, you may not want to tell them this is for your own spiritual good, right? Even though you know it is. And then, again, pray. And then pray some more. And I'm talking about before the visit. As we mentioned in the previous session about praying before your visit, obviously, pray for wisdom. Pray for self-control. Why self-control? Because they may have some criticisms. If they're angry at the church, they may, as you being a representative of the church, may experience some of that anger. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Pray for some self-control. Pray that simply God would work through you. And usually when I pray that, I say, Lord, not only work through me, work in spite of me. Work in spite of me. But work through me. And I think this is absolutely crucial. Pray that the person you're going to be ministering to, that God would open up their hearts to be receptive to this visit, to be receptive to what God wants to do in their lives through your visit. In other words, pray for their open hearts. That's absolutely crucial. And there may be a lot of other things you want to pray about before the visit. But those would be obviously the main things to pray about. The next thing, should you just minister over the phone or in person? In person is always the best, always. But depending upon the situation, maybe the person just does not want to meet with you. And hopefully you can talk to them over the phone. I say hopefully, because if they don't recognize the phone number, they may simply not answer it. And if they don't, leave a message. So for example, if this is a family under your care as an elder, say, let's say Gary Beck, and I'm in the process of visiting those, as an elder, visiting those under my care. I'd like to schedule a time I can stop out at your house and visit with you. And I will call again. What you don't want to say is, please give me a call, and we'll set up a time, because they probably won't call. You take the initiative to do that, obviously. But you want to leave a message, and then call back again, within a relatively short period of time. And if you do talk to them over a phone, that's a whole new presentation, telecare. How do you minister a person to over the phone? Because there's a lot of different dynamics with that. But again, when you talk to them over the phone, just simply introduce who you are, as like I said, like with the message you will leave on the answering machine, and just say, when would be a good time for me to stop out to meet with you? I just want to get to know the families, the people that's under my care as an elder. You don't say, I'm going to come out because you haven't been in church in a long time. Okay? All right. Now, and I think this is, again, very important. Keep in mind 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6, where the Apostle Paul writes, I planted, Apollos watered, but God causes the growth. In other words, you cannot determine what the results of your visit's going to be. You cannot make the person, let's say, come back to church. You can only plant and water caring and compassion and comfort and encouragement in their lives. Plant and water the Word of God, which is specifically what I think Paul was mentioning here. And you leave it up to God to cause the increase. To me, in my years as a pastor, that was freeing. Because a lot of times I wonder, are my sermons making any difference? And I realized I'm just called to plant and water. Now, I want to plant and water in such a way that makes it easier for people maybe to respond. I don't want to be a stumbling block for people to respond. But I get to do the easy part. You get to do the easy part. Just planting and watering. God does the harder part in changing hearts. And to me, that's freeing. So you do what God is calling you to do in making these visits and showing care and compassion. You lend a listening ear and give comfort and encouragement. And then let God do his thing. So that's free. So always remember that verse. And by the way, you may not see that increase and that growth that God's going to cause. Because there may be other people also planting and watering. And you may have to plant and water a number of times. And it may be years later when somebody else decides to do some watering spiritually in their lives, that all of a sudden, if you want to say, God works that miracle, brings them back. But you have been part of the process. You've been part of the process of God using you. So that's a key pass. Underline that in your Bibles. Be a great discussion at elders' meeting as well. Okay, let's talk about actually visiting the inactive member. And these are just some thoughts. There's so much involved here. Again, there's so much we could talk about. I just want to share a few things. First of all, the approach you take is determined in large part with your relationship to the person. If you are really good friends with that person, you're going to approach it one way and maybe even more natural way than you would if a person you hardly ever know, right? And maybe you can be a little bit more forthcoming with a person that's a good, really good friend with you. And to simply say, hey, Ralph, I'm really concerned. I just haven't seen you in church lately. You could take that approach because of the relationship you already have. Whereas other people, you need to establish the relationship at least a little bit first and earn their trust, okay? So the approach you take is determined and the relationship you have with the person. Call to schedule a visit, and we kind of, I already kind of mentioned that, and if the person doesn't answer, then you'll leave a message and then call again. Introduce yourself if needed. It's the next one. Connect meaningfully. Like, again, it's good to see you, or it's good to meet you. How are things going for you? Or, again, if this is a family under your care that you just don't know anything about, take the time to get acquainted. Just say, I want to, just want to get to know you a little bit more, okay, as your elder. And sometimes that's all it takes. I remember at St. Mark, I visited a couple who hadn't been in church for over 10 years. And I had been at the church for 15 years. Okay? So, but I didn't know him. I really didn't know him. So I just called him one day and said, I apologize. I had not contacted you before. And I really don't know you as your pastor. I want to get to know you. So I went out there just to get to know him and show I care. That's all it took. The next Sunday they were in church. The Sunday after that they were in church. And then it's probably been, another 10 years since? They missed only one Sunday, and that's because they were sick. That's all it took. And they were the ones that brought up, Pastor, we haven't been in church for a while. Okay? Sometimes if you just show that you care, that's what people are looking for. At least some people. Okay? So somehow connect meaningfully. Be as natural as you can. Relax. Just talking to a fellow church member, just another person. Just be as natural as you can. Let the conversation flow. And one of the, again, follow the person's lead on that. Lead with care. So next one. Simply by your presence. And sometimes when people look back upon your visit, they may not even remember what you said, but they'll remember that you were there, your presence. Lead with your demeanor, that you're not coming in to lay the law down on them, okay, because they haven't been in church, but your demeanor shows that you care for them. And by what you say, show that you care. And let me add, by how you say what you say, show that you care. That's just important. And let me ask this, why should you care for a person who is spiritually distant? What's that? Yeah, Jesus said so. Love one another. Love your neighbor. What else?
One for whom Christ died.
One for whom Christ died. Yeah. So as you're ministering to this person, know that Christ died for that person. And also, as C.S. Lewis once wrote, you have never met a mere mortal. Okay? So, why should you care? Because Jesus died for them. They have eternal souls. They may be of such a situation that's hard to care for such a person. But just remember those facts. Jesus died for them. They're not mere mortals. And show that you care. I've often thought you never debate a person into the kingdom of God. You love them into the kingdom of God. Obviously, from a human point of view, God does the growth, but you got to show His love. So the next one is listen, don't lecture. It'd be tempting to lecture such a person. To say, why haven't you been in church? or every time they give a different excuse to try to lecture them, that their excuse is not right or valid. Just continue, first of all, continue to listen. Don't lecture. And the next one is follow the other person's lead, as we talked about. And more often than not, you don't have to bring it up that they haven't been in church for a while. I would say about 95% of the people that I visited that have been inactive, they bring it up first because they know they haven't been. And deep down, they probably know why you're there, even though you don't come right out and say it. So they'll usually bring it up in conversation, and then you can talk about that. And if they say, I know, Elder, I haven't been in church for a while, just follow up and say, oh, why is that? Because, not that you're inviting all their excuses, but you still need to know what's behind it all. I've had people not come back to church after their spouse dies because it's been so hard to sit in church now without their spouse when they've done so for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever it's been. And that's why they haven't come back. Or it may be that somebody criticized them in the church. When they volunteered to do something, they were criticized, or they stopped coming back. There could be a whole host, or sometimes they may just say, I simply got out of the habit. Okay? But you let them talk about that and have those spiritual conversations. Now, related to that, was there a hand up? Yeah. Oh.
You and I are old enough to remember Lyle Schaller and his assumptions, and as I recall, one of them was you can kind of assume that everybody that joins the church does so with every intention of being an active member, and that you can assume when you ask them, or why haven't you been coming, that they probably aren't going to tell you the real reason, and that it's going to take several visits perhaps before you really get to the bottom of it.
And that's true, and maybe that's the case because they have to know, can I trust you?
Yeah.
And maybe you need to establish that relationship. And that's why one of the things I'm going to mention when you visit the spiritually distant, the inactives, it's not just a one-time thing. It can be an ongoing process to do that. Because part of it is you're establishing those relationships so which they can open up more and more. Okay. The next thing I want to mention is don't become defensive. It's easy to do. It's easy to become defensive, especially if the person is criticizing the church. Or maybe they're criticizing the pastor or a former pastor. You may want to debate them, but remember, you can win the debate, but not the heart. First of all, I would let them talk it out. Sometimes that's what people need. It's to talk it out and have somebody hear them. And maybe for you, rather than becoming defensive, to say something like this, I'm sorry you had to experience that. Like, for example, somebody criticized them when they were a volunteer. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Why should you say you're sorry since you're not the one that criticized? Because you're a representative of the church. And this person heard that within the church. And for that person to know that there's some type of repentance on the church's part, that they were criticized. Okay? And because a lot of these people have valid reasons. A lot of them have valid reasons, okay? Or to say, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that is fairly common, especially with guys, is we want to fix stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody tells you, this is why I haven't been coming to church because I had a problem with the pastor member. Don't make an offer to fix it. Just let them say, this is the problem. Empathize with them. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
I always want to fix stuff.
Right.
Those of you who are married learn that they don't always want to be fixed. They just want to be free.
Yeah. And so you may just want to admit, you know, I can't fix things, but I'm sorry you had to experience that. And I would love to see you know, in church. Maybe there are certain current situations that are happening, that are issues, that you might want to say, I'll look into the matter and get back to you. Depending upon what that current situation is, all right? And next I put, oh, by the way, also, don't become defensive, is, as I alluded to before, people may want to take their anger out at you. If they're angry at the church or angry at God because you're his representative and the church's representative, they may want to express that anger to you. Let me just say this, don't take it personally. Let them vent. They need to do that. Let them vent. I've had people express their anger at me because of what other people have said. Let them talk. Let them vent. It's therapeutic. And again, say, I'm sorry you had to experience that, or I'm sorry you had to go through that. Okay, next, if appropriate and if needed, you may want to ask, what can the church do for you? Maybe there's some needs there that the church can meet. Now, obviously, if you say this, you got to follow through on it. But there may be situations in which that might be appropriate. After the visit, again, take notes on what you need to report back to your pastor and what you need to remember for the next visit. This is obviously extremely important because you're going to remember those things that they said. Next, don't contact just once. It usually takes multiple times. Another thing we don't have up here, but I want to mention. Yeah.
Gary, I was just going to suggest to say thank you, like send a note or something after the visit. Just the fact that they let you visit would be great.
Oh, yeah, great point. Yeah, Rob said, send a note after the visit. Say, you know, thank you for letting me visit you. That can go a long way. That can go a long way. What happens when the person comes back to church? How should you respond?
Joyfully.
Joyfully. What should you say to the person who comes back to church after? Good to see you. What would happen if a person who has been coming to church all of a sudden comes to church and nobody approaches them? Probably won't come back. Say, because they'll think, boy, I did come back. No, nobody really cares that I came back. So and whether or not you made a visit, if you see people come to church that you do not know, or maybe you haven't seen in a long time, go up to them. Say, again, good to see you. If you don't know them, introduce yourself. Okay? That can go a long way because you want people to feel welcome. Now let me ask, what are some ways you should not respond when people come back to church after being gone for a while? Finally, it's about time. Yeah. He said, you're in my pew. I saw somebody do this once. What's that communicating?
The walls didn't fall over.
Yeah, the walls didn't fall down and you came. So again, it's not only important what you say, it's important what you don't say. And so when the people do come back, or if you see anybody, maybe it's a first-time visitor even, you see them at church and you don't know them, take the time to go introduce yourself, welcome them, say, glad you're here. That can be huge. That can be huge. A resource that I want to recommend, and again, this is from Ken Houck from Stephen Ministries, is called Reopening the Back Door. Answers to questions about ministering to inactive members. Stephen Ministry actually has a whole training program on ministering to inactive members. So if this is something that you and your elder group want to go through, and you can open it up to anybody in the congregation who is interested in reaching out to people from the church that they haven't seen in a while, okay? Great training. And this will cover a lot of different issues, regarding that, and how do you approach it? How do you try to get the congregation to have the whole mindset of reaching out to spiritually distant people. Anyways, again, a great resource. And even if you don't go into full training mode that they offer there, just taking the book and going through it and discussing it can be very, very important. So, any other comments or questions? We just covered a few basics. Yeah.
Big question. What about a neutral site? Meeting somebody on a neutral site, lunch, coffee, whatever. A lot of people, my experience recently, homes are not very open. COVID made it worse.
Okay, good point.
So what about a neutral site?
First of all, my response would be, if they're willing to meet in their own home, that's what I would do, only because you're meeting them on their turf, so to speak. But also, if, let's say they got 3 young kids at home, and you're not going to be able to have an uninterrupted conversation, it might be helpful to meet with a person on a neutral site, and especially if you know them somewhat well, to do that. But yeah, because you obviously want to have these discussions kind of uninterrupted, so to speak. But whatever works best, so that you can meet them. Yeah.
I think nowadays a lot of the inactive members are going to be millennials, and you very well may have their parents still in the pew. If you make a visit on a late 20s, 30s person, would you say anything to the parents? Is it best to not, involve their parents at all?
Let me give you this response. It depends.
Yeah.
Depends upon the people. Maybe depends upon how you know the parents. I would say for the most part, in such situations, I've talked to the parents beforehand.
Tell you what, I have a son that I would plead with somebody to talk to because he will not come to church. And he was confirmed in Lutheran. And once he got married, he hasn't been to church since.
So you'd be delighted to know that somebody had made a visit.
Yes, I would be delighted to know.
Yeah,
I would say to anyone, go talk to him.
Yeah.
Because he's not at that age yet where he's going to listen to me again. He's in that between 18 and 25 where they don't listen to their parents. He's just there. And I'd love to have somebody to talk to him.
I think again, I'd keep it confidential as to what was said. Maybe
Absolutely.
just a real simple, I went to see your son, your daughter, just wants you to know.
And by the way, you may also want to let that inactive person know that what they say is confidential.
Yeah.
To say, whatever you're going to share with me, I will not tell your parents or anyone else. Because if they think that you will, they may not open up to you.
Sure.
Yeah, they may not open up to you. So you may actually want to, make that clear to the couple itself.
I've got one other question for you.
Sure.
Sorry. We have it in our bylaws, that somebody would lose their membership if they're joining another church, if they're out of town, if their whereabouts unknown, But then you get the chronically inactive, and then, you can self-exclude them after something like extended pastoral effort, quote unquote, something like that. So we've had to define, what is extended pastoral effort, with the understanding that it very well may include the lay ministers or the elders in on the effort, and we've tried to define a sort of 3 strikes and you're out kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
What would you think might be, a definition of extended pastoral effort?
That's a tough question. It's a fine line. In my mind, in my practice, it would get to the point where I would say, yeah, we probably should release them from membership. Sometimes it gets to that point after repeated and repeated and repeated contacts. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is there were some people we were just about ready to release. All of a sudden we see them in church. And there's some people that have been faithful members since. If you do release them, communicate that you would really rather not release them, but because they haven't come back after extended visits, you are. But then to communicate, you're always welcome. And we would always receive you back into membership if you would choose to worship the Lord with us. To communicate that. But yeah, at what point do you say, enough's enough? We've done all we can. It's hard. I would probably say more than 3 visits, though. Normally, it might be like 2 or 3 years of continual contacts before I would say, okay, now it's time to release. So, other comments or questions regarding that? Yeah.
It's something that we've been kind of going through and looking at as well recently. And all the elders have taken a group of people and tried to make contact with them on that. And then we sent letters and we tried to make contact a number of different ways and by different means in order to do that. And then it's still a challenge to go, okay, well, when do you actually draw that line? It's still hard.
Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned writing letters. If you're not getting through with the phone calls, and obviously not getting through with, because you can't visit, after numerous phone calls you can't get through, then I would write a letter basically saying, trying to contact you, and trying to schedule a time to visit you. Now that doesn't guarantee that they'll read the letters, because if they see the church's, on the envelope, the church's letterhead, they may not even open it, but at least you can try. All you can do is try. We're called to be faithful. We're called to be faithful. And let's try to control what we can control. We cannot control the results. We can only control the process. And the process is to say, how can we best care for this person who's spiritually distant? How can we best care? And let's show that care. So we can control the process, but not the result.
I think often as you continue to build that relationship, you're making the calls, you're telephoning, you're visiting, the extensive pastoral care, or effort, pastoral effort, you will not need to remove them if that's really how it ends. They will simply say, thank you, I no longer want to be a member. They will
Sure.
remove themselves.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? What I want to do now is, yeah.
You mentioned writing letters, you mentioned calling.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I heard you mention knocking on the door.
It has never been my practice to make a cold call. Not to say that it may not be effective, but because you never know what the situation might be there when you make the cold call. Any of the other pastors want to comment on that about making a cold call?
You're a part of the family who just do that to my family members personally. They would know I'm coming.
If they know you're coming?
I wouldn't just walk up to my family member and knock
Oh, I
on the
see.
door if I was somehow distant from them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had family members do that to me. I'm going, wow. But I mean, they're part of God's family until they're not.
Right.
We've already called them, we've already wrote letters.
But they may not have read the letter. That's the other thing.
Because there's far more behind that closed door than what you know is going on. So it may be one person who is in a relationship that doesn't work. I mean, there's a lot more to the story. So that cold call could of that door could open up a bigger can of worms that don't make good progress. So I think that, as you mentioned earlier, and Dr. Casper said during our call process, you pray some more, and then you pray some more, and let God take care of it from there.
Right.
And it's, we just keep sowing seeds. I think prudence is the best.
Absolutely. Somebody else had their hand up. Yeah.
An example on my list is a person who hasn't been to church for a number of years. And they evidently don't have a phone. We don't have their phone number. And I originally sent letters or cards to make contact and say to call me. And that hasn't worked, and so I made a cold call several times before I got the person to the door, and they weren't very responsive to who I was anyway.
Yeah.
If you're not gonna make a cold call, how do you deal with somebody like that? Because there's multiple people like that. We don't have.
Oh, really?
numbers.
Well, I would, if you know their family, any family members, maybe it's a cousin or an aunt or an uncle, or whatever, that's tough. Yeah, you send the letters, you do what you can do, and ultimately, if they don't respond, you really can't do anything about it other than keep on praying for them. But the point I was going to make, if you don't have an up-to-date phone number, if it's possible to call a family member and say, I've been trying to get hold of so-and-so, how's it best to do that? Do you have an up-to-date phone number or whatever? Or at least they can let the person know that you're trying to.
That doesn't mean they're gonna return your call.
No, you're right.
So how often, you said you go beyond June for a number of years. It's not my habit or my desire, sorry to say, to go to somebody first in town,
Right.
to find them not there, or then come back another time, find they're not there, and then come back another time they're there and they don't want to talk to you. 3 years of that, it's not something.
Right. Yeah, and again, a lot of this depends upon situations. When I'm talking about 2 to 3 years, I'm talking about people that you are in contact with, but you saw them come back. Okay? I would say in a case like that, you discuss it with your pastor and fellow elders and say, what should we do? So it's not just your decision alone, but to get that. And maybe that's a case where the pastor needs to then come, because maybe they would open up the door if it's the pastor. Who knows? Maybe not. Again, you can't control the results or how people respond. You can only control what you do. Yeah.
So say if that's the last resort, you can always knock on the door and say, I'm not here to visit, I just want to know if I can take an appointment. Or
Sure.
if they don't answer, put something in the doorknob that
Right.
says, would love to visit, let me know when there's a good time.
Sure. Yeah. Good idea.
I think the cold call is intrusive. And it can be offensive. So even if they invite you in, you might suggest that, you don't force your way in. You
Yeah.
say, I'm here because I couldn't reach you. Could I see you sometime?
Sure. Yeah. Great approach.
Let
Great
them
approach.
decide.
Yeah.
Some of it might be a bit generational too. I think people who are in their 80s or older usually will welcome you just dropping in.
Yeah.
They remember the days of house calls, and might be different with older people.
Absolutely. Somebody else had their hand up over here earlier. No? Okay. Yeah.
One of the things I think facing the church, and it's definitely happening in ours, is divorce. And when both parents don't feel like they're welcome back to church anymore, you wonder what happened to them, and you go and you find out the divorce is taking place.
Yeah.
And how do you reconcile it? How do you invite them both to back into the church? And I know God loves, we hate the divorce, but, you know, he's still a child of God.
Yeah. And, you know, in cases like that, obviously you minister to each of them individually, obviously, but also to say, I'm not here to take sides. I'm here, you know, to minister to you. And obviously, you want to, the ultimate goal is that they come back to church and to be spiritually fed. Okay? And so you make it like any other inactive member call, but also you want to, and you'll probably hear a lot of stories about the other person, but you say, I'm not here to take sides. So, by the way, one of the other things I want to mention, in my practice, not a huge number of people have come back to church after making the visits. The percentages of people who actually do come back and stay coming back might be low. But let me just say this. Even if one person or one couple that you reach out to does come back and is faithful, it's worth all the efforts. Even if one. And again, remember, you may not see the fruit of your efforts. God may cause the growth long after you're gone. Who knows? But also remember another passage I want you to remember. It's 1 Corinthians 15, towards the end. I forget exactly which verse, 57, 58, somewhere in there. It's the great resurrection chapter, right? So Jesus is alive. He's on the loose, so to speak. And Paul ends that chapter essentially by saying that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So serve the Lord with all your heart.
Therefore, my beloved brother, be steadfast and
Movable.
always abounding in the work of the Lord.
Thank you.
58.
Yeah. Always abound in the work of the Lord. Your labor in the Lord is not in vain. And I say that because sometimes it might feel like it's in vain. But with Jesus, it's never in vain. So you plant, you water, let God cause the increase.
You told a wonderful story before.
I
I
did?
was going to give you a quick one, too. From my experience, I had a fella that I called who was really inactive, and he thought he'd placate me by sending a check, a contribution, you know, to the church. And so so it was a big one, yeah. So I called on the phone and I said, you know, I really want you to make this contribution in a worship service and put it into play. And I'm going to send this back to you, and you bring it personally. And that worked. He started coming.
All right. Good for you. Good for you. Because some people will say, all they want is my money.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, what I'd like to do is do a couple role plays. I will play the role of the caregiver. I'm making the visit. And let's do something with an inactive first. Who wants to be an inactive member? And the situation is you were a volunteer in the church, but somebody criticized you because you didn't do the way it's always done. Okay? Or you were in the kitchen and didn't follow all the rules, or whatever it may be. You make it up. You make it up. You were criticized, and you're thinking, okay, you know, here I was wanting to volunteer. I'm not going to come back. I'm not going to come back to. Not only am I not going to volunteer anymore, I'm not going to come back to the church if they're just going to criticize me. Okay, so that's a situation. Who would like to volunteer to be that person? Anybody? Okay, thank you. But after the role play, I want to have a discussion. What did I say right, and what did I say that wasn't right? Because I will purposely say things that are not right. I want to see if you catch it. Are you ready? Okay. Hi, Chad.
Hi. How you doing, Gary?
Yeah, doing well. Doing well. Thanks for allowing me to come out to your house and to have the visit. Just haven't talked to you in a while, and really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you coming, Gary.
Yeah. Do I if we just sit down
Yes.
and just chat for a while?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, How's life been going for you?
You know, it's been okay. I'll tell you, I haven't been to church. I don't know if you've noticed or not.
Yeah?
Yeah. A little disappointed with some of the gossip that's going on, and I've been criticized. They don't like the way that I do my Bible class. Some people aren't appreciative of that. When I volunteer, it seems like I'm constantly criticized for whatever decision I may make, whether it's the way the chairs sit or how the table is set. I've finally given up on it, Gary.
I can understand how you might feel about that. You want to tell me more about it?
Sure. So, you know, Sally Smith, if you don't mind me naming names, Sally Smith and Ruby Tuesday weren't real happy with the way I was doing things, and I tried to let them know that, you know, this is the way that we've always done it, and this is the way that I think it should be done. It was frustrating that they wouldn't listen to what I had to say.
Yeah, I get that. But why not coming back to church? I mean, I can understand maybe stop volunteering, because who wants to be criticized all the
Right.
time?
Well, I know that they've been talking about what I have done to other people within the church, and I know that those other people are judging me. I can't deal with it anymore, Gary.
How do you know they're judging you?
Well, I mean, don't you? I mean, if somebody else is doing something wrong, and you find out about it, don't you judge that person based on that?
Well, I hope if they're doing something wrong, I would hope I would at least talk to them to say, you know, because they may not know they're doing something wrong, and to say, you know, maybe this is a better way to do it.
Good point. Good point. I guess still that frustration is there, that fear, that anxiety is still there, that there's other people that know about it, and I'm being judged for it. So that's why I'm not coming back to church. I've decided to stay away so that I can avoid that confrontation completely.
Are you going to church anywhere?
No, haven't gone anywhere.
Why is that?
Well, I've just decided that, you know, with everything else that's going on, I'm sure that if I went to another church and volunteered in that other church, I'd probably have the same problem.
Well, churches are certainly made up of sinners. There's no perfect church, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
But, you know, I would love to see you come back, though, Chad. I'm sorry that you had to experience what you experienced. Would you like me to talk to the people?
No, I don't think that'll do any good. I think maybe I should try again. Maybe I should try to come back. Maybe not volunteer right away, but at least come back and visit maybe a few times and see if I'd like to get back there. Maybe that would be a good idea.
Yeah, maybe easing back into it. Yeah, I would love to see you come back, you know, to do that. And, because I hope you find, just want you to be spiritually fed at the church. And it's great to be part of the fellowship of believers. So to have you come back, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how's life going for you otherwise?
Good. I can't complain. I have a job. I have a wife.
Good.
So I think everything is good.
All right. Yeah, great to hear that. So I'd love to see her come back with you too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dad. So what did I say that was wrong?
Thank you.
Exactly, yeah. I offered to talk to the disgruntled people.
What if he had said, well, I'm staying home and watching your live stream, that's good enough.
I didn't think of that. That was good.
Yeah. part of my response to that would be, and it would all depend again upon our relationship. I would say, well, first of all, well, thank you for watching the worship service, and hopefully you were worshiping along with us, okay? I think it's even more beneficial to be there in person, to be part of the body of Christ. We were, God meant us to be in that relationship and meant us to worship together. And you can kind of go on and on about that. I remember when COVID first did, and my wife and I, we watched live streaming that. In fact, we would watch a live stream recordings from this church and listen to Alex preach. Anyways, we would sing the songs at home, the hymns, just nothing, not comparable, just us two singing as opposed to being, But the live streaming thing, there are more and more people that do that rather than coming in person. So, what else did I do that was not right? Yeah, or you're going to make a comment?
Well, I was going to make a comment because this conversation was not bad as far as how it might actually play out, and we're all going to make mistakes, of course, but listening to them and directing the conversation on the level they're at. You didn't talk about the means of grace and the need for spiritual renewal and refreshment and nurture, that kind of thing. Although certainly in the back of your mind as pastor, elder, that's the heart of the issue.
Sure.
But it's more often than not a relationship issue with other people in the church, maybe with the pastor of the church in general. And it's not on a spiritual level necessarily in the minds of the individual. They don't wake up one day and say, I'm just not, I don't buy into it anymore.
Right.
I always think of one elder I had in the previous congregation who was overzealous in his visits to the inactive. I mean, he came in loaded for bear. He would quote the Lutheran confessions and the Bible and the catechism and everything. He took them so deep into the spiritual realities. Man, they couldn't go that far. They weren't ready for it. And that's not really what was an issue with that. So, I know a lot of our elders are maybe unsure of themselves. Well, what if I get into a theological conversation and I don't know where to go with it?
Mm-hmm.
I would just say to the elders, 95% of the time, it's not going to be that. It's going to be just relationships.
Yeah.
And we're going to think sometimes, well, that's petty.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, but that's where they are. And if we care about them, we forgive their pettiness. In the back of our mind, we're not going to absolve them of their pettiness while we're talking to them. But we're just dealing with them where they are.
Yeah. What else? Yeah.
I think kind of in the middle there and stuff, when you were trying to get information from him, it seemed like you were very quick to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't pause as in really listening to what he said. So
Right.
Why is that? Why is that? I mean, it seemed like it could have leaned into a debate somewhat in the ideal and stuff. But then as you went on with the conversation, you paused a little bit more, you lightened up by talking about other things and everything, and come back and stuff. So I think I sensed a little bit of kind of not defensiveness, but kind of like, I'm extracting information. If I had been on the other side there, I'd been like, are you interrogating me? What's going on and stuff. So that's why I sensed a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Should have done more listening and have him talk more about.
Pause stuff,
right.
To kind of give them the message that you are listening.
Right.
Pause. I'm pausing. I'm thinking about what you said.
Sure. Good point. Other comments? Anything that was done right?
The relational thing.
What's that?
The relational thing came across quite clearly. I would really like to see you there. I miss you. And
Next question, tell me more.
Tell me more. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes they say, tell me more, or say, would you like to talk about it? And if he would have just simply said, yeah, I've received a lot of criticism within the church, then a response would be, well, would you like to talk about it? Or tell me more. Yeah.
That was a good question when you asked, when he said he wasn't attending in any church, and you asked him why. You know, that's, like you said, that's at the root of the relationships, is the problem, not the,
Yeah.
you know, but if he's not going to any church, is it a theological more basis that you need to dig into, but don't necessarily know how to?
See, and at that point of the conversation, I was thinking, this guy's not going to come back. He doesn't want to come back. So I'm thinking he still needs to get that word and sacrament ministry. He still needs to get that spiritual nourishment. So if he's not going to come back to this church, I'm hoping that he'll at least be attending another church and not to drop out altogether. Now, it was surprising that at the end that you talked about coming back, and that's when I again affirmed that. So,
And sometimes that is that person's way of getting rid of the other person. Yeah, I'll come back.
you're right.
And they don't show up.
You're absolutely right. And what do you do in that case? If they say, yeah, I'll come back. In fact, I'll be here this Sunday. They don't show up. What do you do? Call them. I missed you. You don't say, hey, you said you were going to come. And you weren't there. You say, hey, I missed you. And I'm concerned. Is there a reason why you didn't come this Sunday when you know? Because maybe they got sick or something. You never know. Okay. But to follow that up. What's that?
You tell him you rolled out the red carpet for him and everything.
Yeah.
Maybe they went to the other service.
What's that?
They went to the other service.
Oh, they went to the other service. Yeah.
Tell me went to both to make sure.
Yeah, there you go. But you know, that's an important point, though. If somebody that you ministered to said they're going to come back, and you have two services, I would either if you're going like to the early service, and you know another elder that's going to the late service, to at least have them, or at least have the pastor, you know, keep an eye open for these people and greet them. Or at least you can maybe stay until the beginning of that late service to see if that person's come. It's well worth your time to do that. Okay, and then if they didn't come, you know, then you give them a call, either that day or the next day. That's a good point. Yeah.
I just say, have you considered Trinity Glendora? That's where
That's good. That's good. Okay, let's do we have time or not? Is it time for a break? Okay, time for a break, and we come back at what, 2?
2 o'clock.
Okay, about 14-minute break. Come back at 2 o'clock.